I'm an immigration lawyer. I went to law school for a variety of reasons having nothing to do with immigration. I hadn't really thought about what I wanted to do when I graduated. But my second summer of law school, I had an internship with a local nonprofit and happened to fall into the immigration project there. I realized over the course of that summer that my family story had a lot in common with the stories of so many of the clients I was working with, who were also seeking to make the US their home. My grandparents and great-grandparents immigrated to the US from Russia, Latvia, and Lithuania between the early 1900s and 1920s. They were lucky to have come when they did. Europe became a much more dangerous place for Jews after they left. For our family, immigration meant a chance at life and at freedom. But until that summer, I didn't think much about what it really meant for people from other parts of the world to be able to migrate freely as well. My advantages in life are a result of immigration, the result of a process by which anyone can come to a different country and start life anew. I became an immigration lawyer because I realized that I wanted to help people from other parts of the world have the same opportunity and the same advantages that I had. The rules were easier when my family came to this country in the early part of the 20th century. Immigration law has become much more onerous and complex since then. But there are other ways the law has improved. Our history is littered with the bad immigration policies of racist and bigoted administrations. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 barred all Chinese from entering the US until its repeal in 1943. The Asiatic Barred Zone Act in 1917 kept most other Asians out of the US until its repeal in 1952. And the National Origin Quota Act of 1924 targeted Italians and Jews and remained largely in place until 1965. In recent decades, however, the law seemed to have evolved in a direction in which everyone was supposed to be treated equally, period. Anything else seemed inconceivable. Fast forward to January 2017. I'm working at a public interest law firm as an immigration staff attorney. I mainly work with children fleeing violence from Central America, but I'm part of a larger team of attorneys and support staff that handles a wide variety of immigration matters and that deeply cares about immigrants' rights. The night of Friday, January 27th, news came out that an executive order banning people from majority Muslim countries had been signed and would go into effect the following day. There had been talk of a Muslim ban during the campaign for president. There was no way this executive order was anything other than a Muslim ban. That would be completely unconstitutional. The next day, my coworker Chris texted me and said that she was going to LAX to do what she could to help out. She asked me if I wanted to come too. I texted back and said I'd be happy to help. I drove to LAX by myself. I made my way to the departures area of the Tom Bradley International Terminal and found a group of lawyers, including Chris and a fellow coworker, sitting on the floor with laptops or talking in small groups. There were about 10 lawyers at first, but more kept coming until we had a veritable army of lawyers patrolling the terminal. There were immigration lawyers, civil lawyers, criminal lawyers, and even a lawyer from the state attorney general's office. I was tasked with walking around the terminal and finding people that had friends or relatives detained by immigration authorities. I listened to these individuals and wrote down their stories. I carried a sign while I walked through the terminal saying that I was an immigration lawyer and asking people to tell me if they knew somebody being detained. One young man and his mother were there waiting for his father, who was coming back from Iraq and in limbo. They were confused and profoundly worried. They didn't know if he would be able to enter the US or if he was already on a plane back to Iraq. Another man who had been waiting hours for a friend to come back from Yemen likewise had no idea what was going on or whether his friend would be able to rejoin him in the US despite holding a valid student visa. I've worked with survivors of trauma for years, but I've never worked with people experiencing trauma in real time, especially trauma caused by forces so outside of their control. Indeed, so outside of my own control as well. The immigration authorities didn't have much guidance on how to implement the travel ban that day. And lacking guidance, they took it on themselves to enforce the order in as mean a spirit and with as broad a brush as they can get away with. They detained the very old and the very young. They tried to force permanent residents to give up their green cards. They physically carried a man who refused to leave the US onto a plane bound for Dubai. Stories that people told us that first day were the basis for a series of lawsuits filed in federal district court, one of which resulted in the government having to pay to bring that man carried onto the plane to Dubai back to the US. I spent another day at LAX the following week, by which time several courts across the country had halted the travel ban in whole or in part. My firm handled a few of the cases that we identified during our time at LAX, and all of them, as far as I know, have already been resolved successfully. It's easy to resolve a case successfully when the government is so clearly acting in violation of the law. I went to LAX in order to combat the travel ban, but I can't say I went there to help Muslims specifically. I do the same thing for any people who are being unfairly targeted on the basis of their country of origin and their religion. My life story and my family's history revolve around escaping oppression for exactly these same reasons, and that is the stand I have chosen to take in my life's work. I believe my colleagues and I made a difference, albeit a small difference, when it mattered the most for someone to speak up and say enough is enough. I hope that someone else would do the same thing for me if I was the one being unjustly targeted. Almost a year has passed since that first day at LAX. I have seen a lot of interest post-travel ban from the legal community in helping to fight for immigrants' rights, and a lot more interest from new attorneys in the field of immigration law. My colleagues and I are also encouraged by the role that the federal courts have played in upholding the rule of law. We can't count on the president or on Congress, but we can count on the courts to be there for us, at least for the time being. We might not always like the end result, but the process still seems fair, and as far as the travel ban was concerned, a just result was largely achieved. The big question now is, where do we go from here? What can we do as a nation to counter injustices like the travel ban? We need to remain vigilant and never sit on the sidelines. Justice is hard work. Its realization is bigger than any individual lawyers, bigger than the legal profession. When we see an injustice, we all need to speak up and do something concrete. The forces of ignorance win when people stay silent. There might be petty tyrants in this country and in other countries who decide to enact similar bans or measures in the future, but hopefully they'll think twice, knowing that people of conscience, lawyers and lay people, will come out and fight them every step of the way.